Hello, I'm Susan King, Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with one of our most famous graduates. We're proud to call you a Tar Heel, I'll tell you that.
I'm thrilled to be able to call myself a Tar Heel. I've loved this school from the second that my family moved to the United States, and I saw my first Carolina basketball game. I think it was like October or November of 1980, sitting in my dad's living room.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was love at first sight. Sam Perkins, James Worthy. That's how far back I go.
So they can take credit every day when they read the New York Times,
Yes.
the coverage at the White House, and know we had an influence in her life.
That's right. No, absolutely. This was a seminal part in my life, the time that I was here, like from 83 to 87. And it's, where I really learned to love journalism, where I learned how to write and how to report. And then I just really, I had finally, once I got here, the first few years after my family moved from Liberia, I was very, very shy. And it wasn't until I got to Carolina that I started to finally come out of that and be more myself. And it took a few years to sort of, become, so by this, the 4 years that I was here, I was really, I got to know a lot more about myself, and I just felt normal. I felt like I was embraced in this giant family, and I went to basketball games, and we were protesting apartheid, and we're doing all sorts of stuff, and I worked at the Daily Tar Heel, and I couldn't have been happier.
Let's go one step back.
Okay.
Of course, you had to come here from Liberia, and it was the collapse of your country. But when did you have that seminal idea that you wanted to tell people about the world, that you wanted to be a journalist?
It's a weird story because, I was raised in Liberia, and there was a military coup in 1980, and my family ran away. And when I first got here, we were in Tennessee for a year and then moved to North Carolina, but I really missed home, and I really felt like the fact that I missed Liberia so much made me, I think, in some way want to be part of the rest of the world. I felt like I could be closer to Liberia if I was watching the news, if I was reading the paper, if I was, engaging with everything going on outside. And that was also in part because I didn't have a lot of friends yet. I was this suspicious new girl from Africa, and I think one way of dealing with it for me was to just like sort of embrace the outside, because what was going on close to me wasn't too great at the time. And that sort of started. And then I read All the President's Men in 11th grade, civics class at Dudley High School in Greensboro, and that sort of combined with what had just happened in Liberia, and the fact that I felt like the military coup in Liberia took me completely by surprise. And I never wanted to be shocked like that about anything again. I wanted to know what was going on, so I wouldn't have to face that kind of surprise. Sort of led me toward the journalistic path. And then the fact that Carolina, like back then, still does, had one of the best journalism schools in the country. So, by the time I got to Carolina, I pretty much knew this is what I was going to do. I was going to come to Carolina. I was going to be a journalist. Started knocking on the DTH doors my orientation week.
Well, I have to ask then, for all those Daily Tar Heels and reporters, did it really hone the skills? Were you able to find your curiosity and become that kind of reporter doing that?
It did. Every other class I took, I was terrible. Okay, I remember all the general college requirements, and I was okay, always okay in like English and social studies and history and that kind of stuff. But I shined in journalism. My biology grades were terrible, and the math, and I would do the bare minimum, to get the general college requirements for, math and science and all of that. And then I'd get to journalism. I know, don't tell people that. But I get to J53, and I still remember in like sophomore year with Jock Lauderer, who is still here.
Absolutely.
And I loved it. It was so great. And he stood up there and he was talking. He would give us a fact sheet and, write your story. And I really liked doing it. And then at the Daily Tar Heel, I was on the state and national desk, and I was writing about, we were so insufferable in college because you're like so passionate about everything going on. And I would write editorials about, Jesse Helms, and I would write news articles about I remember the Filipino presidential elections were going on, and I was writing about that, and then I was writing about the North Carolina prison system, and there was overcrowding there, and I covered the apartheid. I mean, I covered the apartheid, the divestiture protests on campus, and then I go back to the DTA. I chained myself to one shanty in front of the South Lawn, which is so unjournalistic, so unprofessional now, because I was protesting, and then I would go back to the DTH and write about it, which is like, I shouldn't even tell anybody that now, because that's appalling. No journalist should be part of the story. But I loved it, and I love going up to the honor box on a day that my story would be. And I still remember the first time I saw my byline in there in the DTH and picking it up and standing there shaking. There's nothing to this day still gets me in the pit of my stomach like that.
But it was real experience because there was a real audience.
And it's a real
work.
newspaper. It is a good newspaper.
I think so.
It's in so many ways is better than so many local newspapers. The DTH is and there were standards there. And it's like, I didn't get on my freshman year. I mean, I tried and I didn't, they didn't pick me. I didn't get on until sophomore year. They ran a couple of my, ranting editorials freshman year, but it wasn't until sophomore year that I made it onto the staff. And we had copy editors. I remember Jill Gerber and Andy Trincia, and there's just so many people there and you wanted to be good enough to be, to get into the DTH, and it was enough. I could get my news from the DTH. I didn't need, to read at the time. Now I'll never, I shouldn't even be saying this because everybody should be reading the New York Times too. But I could, I was able to keep up on what was going on in the world, through this beautiful campus newspaper.
And it's independent, so that's also
Yes.
a wonderful opportunity. What ambitions did you leave the school with? I mean, did you say, I want to be at the top? You've been at the Wall Street Journal, and of course now you're at the New York Times covering the White House, the most, storied beat in the world. Is this where you wanted to be?
It is. It was so, and I talk to students now, it's so, I think college is a time to question, what you want to do and try different things. And I, advise students and tell them, look at different things. But I didn't do that. I came here convinced I wanted to be a newspaper, not TV. I wanted to be a newspaper reporter. I wanted to do print. And that was what I worked towards for, the entire time I was here. And when I left here, I was sending out my clips my, senior year, and this is what I sent it out to newspapers, and I wanted to get on a job of a metropolitan newspaper, and I'd punch my time clock or whatever, but my goal was to cover international news. I wanted to either be in Washington eventually writing about politics, or I wanted to be a foreign correspondent writing about the world. And
you're
so
doing
that
both.
was my I got to do the foreign correspondent part before the politics part, which is probably just as well. But that was always what I wanted to do.
What I find interesting about your coverage right now from the White House is how you have to tell about the world all the time. So Iran, Afghanistan, big issues of the last 3 months. And you seem to bring a diplomat's point of view.
I'm a total foreign policy geek now, because I've spent so much time now covering foreign policy at the State Department, overseas, that's where I lean anyway. And I found once they transferred me and put me on the White House beat in 2009, it was really hard for me, and it still is, to do the pure politics, because I spent so much of my career doing the foreign stuff. So I'm happiest, then I'm playing in my happy place when I'm writing about Iran or Israel or Afghanistan and the intersection between that and domestic policy. I'm much less sure of myself when I'm writing about pure politics, and it takes me a lot longer. An Afghanistan story I can do, knock out in 3 to 4 hours on deadline. I know just who to call. I know where to go. I can, and then I get a political story, and I'm sort of still flailing, and I'm still learning. It's almost like you're still building up the sources. I don't have as many sources in the political world, and I feel like I don't have the just the innate political smarts that a lot of our other really good political reporters do. And that's the thing with the White House beat, is you've got to be able to do both. And I'm learning how to do both, but I'm still learning.
I could go on and talk to you for hours, which we don't have. The students will get to talk to you more, but I want to get one other insight from you, leading from what you've just talked about in terms of the international. You grew up in another country, so you've got two views. In America, you could have the view of the other, because you had to come here as an immigrant and start all over again. but you also have the view as an American, you know,
Yes.
and a voter. How does that affect does it enrich your reporting? You know, does it give you an experience that you think is invaluable?
I hope it does. I mean, and I think it does. It gives me a level of, I think, depth that I might have to work harder to get if I wasn't from somewhere else. And it's not that, American reporters have an enormous amount of depth, but it made it a little bit easier for me to understand. There's just a part of it that, I'm from a Liberian family that's like, I know the way we grew up and sort of our rituals and our customs and that, looking at America from the outside. I spent 14 years in Liberia first looking at this great, fabulous, we thought America was the best place on earth country, but I have that outsider sense of it. And so I hope that helps to inform my reporting when I'm, somewhere else, and I hope it helps to inform my reporting when I'm here. It's funny because I never feel more Liberian than when I'm here in the States, and I never feel more American than when I leave. And it's really weird. I go anywhere else outside of this country, and I'm immediately the most American person you can imagine. And then when I'm here, I feel like I'm Liberian.
That is the American story.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It absolutely is.
And part of the story for our students is you're now part of their history and their tradition. So Helene Coopers are going to be lining up outside of here looking for that New York Times job 20 years from now. Thank you for joining us, Helene.
Thank you so much.